Hello and welcome to the Wild Side of STEAM, where we explore the unusual careers in science, technology, engineering, art, and math at the Smithsonian's National Zoo. My name is Shelley. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'll be your host for today. In a couple minutes, we're going to meet our first guest and hear all about an unusual zoo job, landscape architect. While we wait for more friends to join, you're going to see a quick poll question pop up on your screen that reads, do you know what a landscape architect is? Yes or no? While you take a minute to submit your answers, I'm going to go over the format of our webinar today. It is live captioned. If you feel the need to use the captions, you will find that CC button at the bottom of your screen for those to appear. Our program will be about 30 minutes long with an additional 15 minutes at the end to answer as many questions as we can. Remember, this is a webinar, so we cannot see or hear you, nor can you see or hear each other. You can, however, interact with us in a number of ways. As you see, we will be using quite a few polls throughout our program today. Additionally, you will see that Q&A is open. Please use the Q&A at any time throughout our program to ask any questions for me or our guest. And lastly, you will see that our chat is open as well. Now I want you to find that chat feature right now, and I want you to type in there and tell us your name and where you are joining us from. I see Laura's class is joining us from Brooklyn, New York. And hi, Elijah. Hi, Isaac. Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, Madison, Anu and Leela from Dubai. Wow, we have Tabitha from Indiana. Nathaniel, Alex, also from New York, Chase from Baldwinsville, Dallas, Texas, Newark, New Jersey, Falls Church, Virginia, that's my hometown, Long Island, Memphis, Gabriel, hi, Liam, hello, Newark, Maryland, very close by, amazing. Wow, more people from Dubai, Long Island. All right, I'll give you just a couple more seconds on that poll. We will close that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wonderful. So we have some great results that not a lot of our guests know what a landscape architect is. So we're very excited to share that with you today. Now, once again, welcome to the Wild Side of STEAM. I'm so thrilled to be joined by Matt Sellers, landscape architect at the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute. Hi, Matt, and welcome.
Hey, Shelley, how's it going? Thank you for having me. I can't believe where all these people are coming from, like where they're joining us from. This is amazing.
I'm very happy that our reach is quite far, but we also have some local folks as well. Why don't you start by telling us what it is you do for the zoo?
Sure. So I am a landscape architect here at the National Zoo. And I think an easy way of thinking about landscape architecture is that we help design the outside world. So everywhere sort of in between the buildings, if you want to think of it that way. Next time you're outside, if it's walking down the street, at the park, rec center, at your school, just take a look around and notice what's all around you. You have trees, shrubs, paths, plazas, playgrounds, all that stuff. There's a good chance that a landscape architect was a part of that design.
All right, so we actually have another poll right off the bat for our viewers to take a guess. Which of the following do landscape architects help plan at the zoo? Animal habitats, kids' playgrounds, walkways, paving, fencing, the plants in animal habitats. What do you think? Matt hinted at it a little bit. We are getting tons of responses already. Give you just a few other seconds. Those responses are pouring in. Oh, you all are so smart. All right, we will close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see these results. All right, so we were pretty split here. The most votes were for animal habitats, followed by plants and animal habitats. So, Matt, which of these are true?
Well, it's a trick question. All of them are true. So we do all of it. And especially here at the zoo, our focus is not just with people areas and designing for our guests and our staff, but yet we also work on the animal habitats and help develop their homes.
That's really, really cool. So, but the zoo is home to about 2,700. That's 2,700 different animals representing about 390 different species. So I imagine there's a lot of differences and a lot of planning that goes into these various habitats.
Yeah, for sure. Our process here at the zoo, and this is pretty typical across the board, but we kind of work with design phases and then construction phases for our projects. You know, the zoo is a big open park, so we always have a lot of projects. And some of them are focused, again, on our guests, and some are more focused on our animals. But generally speaking, we start with a design team. So there's always a group of folks, these are experts. Some of them we hire to come in, some of them we have on our team here at the zoo or at the Smithsonian. So people like architects, landscape architects, obviously, engineers. We have a horticulture team here that really knows their plants and how to take care of them. We have a facilities team that takes care of all of our buildings and some of our landscape as well. We have safety experts, accessibility experts, and of course we have our animal experts, the folks who actually take care of our animals on the day-to-day. And so when we start a new project, we get a team together of the people who should be in the room, and we start talking through the needs or the goals of that project. You know, what do we want to succeed in doing at the end of the project? And part of that is, you know, let's say this, imagine we're building a new gorilla climbing structure. We'll talk about things like, well, how are the gorillas going to use that structure? What type of activities would they need to do? How tall should it be? What type of material should it be made out of? Where inside their exhibit should it sit so that they have a good location that's comfortable for them, but also a location that works really well for our guests and gives them a good experience as well, so they can actually see the gorillas on the structure. So a lot goes into it. And through that process of design, we get to a point where often it's a landscape architect or an architect will take all of those goals and actually create a design and draw it up in plan and in details and all kinds of different ways, so that we can then communicate what we're proposing through the design, not only to the clients and to everyone else who's going to sort of review it and approve it, but also we have to create the documents, we call them construction documents, that we will then hand off to the next team who will build it for us.
Oh.
And so after design, it's construction. So design, construction. And in construction, my job mostly is to help review progress of the construction. So we'll hire another team to probably build that gorilla structure. But I'll go out to the site and visit and make sure that they're sort of fulfilling the goals of the project. So that can get me out of the office, which is great.
That's very nice. We did hear earlier today that you were out in the park with your hard hat.
That's right. Please forgive the hair, but that's right. I was out at the Birdhouse this morning looking at some faux rock samples.
Very
exciting
cool
stuff.
Yeah, we're actually going to touch on that project just a little bit later in our program. But you mentioned, you know, how you reach the needs of gorillas by building these gorilla climbing structures. Can you go into a little bit how the needs of, say, a gorilla exhibit might differ than those climbing structures that you need to build for maybe a tamandua or a much smaller animal?
Well, it's tricky. So we, you know, architects, landscape architects, we all kind of are client based. So, you know, outside of the zoo, your client, you can usually sit down and you can talk to them and say, you know, well, what do you want to get out of this project? What are your needs? Do you want a place to play? Do you want a place to rest? All of that. It's hard to ask those questions of a gorilla or a clouded leopard. So we rely heavily on our animal experts here at the zoo. And many times that's the keepers and the curators who work with these animals on the daily basis. They observe their behaviors, they document their behaviors, they study them. So they are invaluable to letting us as the design team know how to design for it. So for the gorilla climbing structure, for example, you know, we could just put posts straight up in the air and just think they're going to climb up the posts, but really they perform better if you give them an angled post to actually climb up. And we know that we want to give them multiple stages to sit on at different heights, because sometimes they don't like to sit and see each other all the time. They just kind of like to hide in their own little zone. That makes them feel more comfortable. So we learn all of that type of behavioral stuff from the animal care group. And, our goal is often, we want to provide a diversity of activities. We want areas that make the animal feel safe, places where they can rest, places where they can play. Every design is kind of tailor-made for that animal's behavior. And in addition to our animal care group, there are also standards that the Association of Zoos and Aquariums develop, and that we refer to for most of our projects that involve animals. And these standards are developed from zoos and experts across America. So all different kind of folks are coming together and putting together, things like, well, some of it is the behavior stuff we just talked about, but it's also like, how large should a habitat for a lion be, and how do we design it so that we can ensure that the lion won't get out, or that people can't get in. So
yeah. It sounds like you're collaborating across the zoo with outside partners to do with construction.
Always.
Also, other zoos, we're all want to make sure that all of our animals have the best care and the best space. And so once again, folks, we have another poll that's coming up to help you think a little bit through this. So we're going to pretend like we're building a habitat for a clouded leopard. And for those of you who don't know, I think we do have a picture of what a clouded leopard is. So what elements would you include in a clouded leopard habitat? Would you include heating elements, climbing structures, a water source, hiding places, total containment, taking into account, the things that you think a clouded leopard would want in their habitat? Oh, tons of responses already pouring in. We're all amazing. Oh, here we have our clouded leopard. What a cute picture. Now, once again, a clouded leopard might have very different needs than a gorilla or a tamandua or a shrew or a flamingo. Right, I'll give you just a couple more seconds to answer this poll. Close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see. All right, most people said hiding places, and then water source, climbing structure, heating element, and total containment. So these are all correct. You're all very, very smart. So just to give a little bit of background on clouded leopards, they are a arboreal cat species. Arboreal means they were spending more time in trees, and they are mostly from Thailand or Southeast Asia, where it is very warm. And so in addition to all those climbing structures, we would also want a heating element, right, Matt? How would we incorporate a heating element into a clouded leopard exhibit?
Well, there's a few different ways we've done it, but what we use mostly around the park are sort of these solid panels. It kind of just looks like a piece of rigid board, but it also is electrified and it exudes heat. It's safe to touch, so often see an animal to kind of cozy right up to it. Our cheetahs are a good example, and our sloth bears as well. They love them, so that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, and so that's one of these exhibit elements, right, that we can put in an exhibit so that in the wintertime, our guests would still have the opportunity to see a tropical animal. And a water source is, of course, right, we want all of our animals to always have access to clean and fresh water. And hiding places, like we always said, cats are very elusive and clouded leopards like to hide, and they have great camouflage. So giving them those opportunities to hide is great. Now, Matt, can you talk a little bit about what it means for a clouded leopard to have total containment in their habitat?
I think you're saying that they are good climbers and they are very resourceful. So for clouded leopards and other species, it's not only important to have a way of keeping them in along the sides of their habitat, but we also have to cover their habitat, because otherwise there's a good chance they may climb up the sides, or if they're up in a tree, have an opportunity to hop out. So it's an extra layer of control, I guess.
Yes, safety always has to be a consideration, especially when building new habitats. That's really great. So Matt, can you tell us a little bit about what the coolest project that you've gotten the chance to work on is?
Well, there have been many, for sure, but I think I want to talk about the Birdhouse, which is kind of the current big project going on here at the zoo. It's the biggest project I've ever worked on at the zoo, and we're all really excited about it finishing up in the next year or so. So I did bring some slides along we could share as well. I'll walk you through. Great. So this is a rendering. It's a drawing from that you are viewing from above. It's sort of a bird's eye view, if you will, of the birdhouse. What you're seeing is at the top of the image, that sort of brown and gray block, that is the building of the birdhouse itself. Inside, there's going to be 3 big aviaries where birds can fly around and guests can walk through the aviaries.
Wow.
But the thing that I want to talk about first really is the garden. So that's really the landscape focused portion of this project. So you see it there in the front, that sort of curved striped path along there is the path guests will take from the bottom of that image, and then they'll come up and across and then arrive at the birdhouse. So when we were thinking about the design for this space, we knew a few things. People get really tired walking around the park. We have a lot of hills around here. And so we typically want to find opportunities to provide resting spaces, or even spaces where a family can kind of sit down. The kids can run around, freely if they still have energy. And so what we have here is we've made an opportunity to actually create a space that provides that. So the lawn area, the sort of the green space in the center there, is big enough that folks can come in, they can sit on the grass. There's also benches along a path. There's shade. There's all kinds of great sort of resting opportunity there. There's probably going to be an outdoor cafe. It's going to be great. And it's kind of a unique space, surprisingly, for the zoo. We have benches around like along our paths, but we don't have kind of a nice big lawn that people can hang out at.
I love how intentional that was too, right? It wasn't just, oh, we're building a sidewalk, we're building a pathway. We want to create intentional space for green space for our families to just relax at the zoo after they've walked up the hill. I love that.
Yeah. And that was one of our goals for the design. And so this is how that goal came to be in reality, which is great. It's going to be fantastic. We also, though, are thinking about like just providing a beautiful arrival experience. At the bottom of the screen, I said, that's where you'll come from. And you mentioned there's pandas on the other side of that path. So you'll essentially come from pandas, walk over a bridge that goes over our elephant yards, and then arrive at this beautiful garden. I think it's going to be a great progression of experiences there. And then you'll have this resting spot. And it's also going to be beautiful because it's going to be really heavily planted throughout. And you see here, this is another rendering, another illustration of the building straight ahead, of course, and the glass, the tall glass in the middle of that shot is kind of where the entry to that building is. But you get a really good sense of the planting on either side, and it's really supposed to be enveloping our guests. So it's great for guests. It's going to be a fantastic sort of person-centered experience. But we are also thinking about animals and wildlife with the design of this portion as well. So things like the planting. So landscape architects often help select all of the trees and shrubs, grasses, perennials, the flowers and everything that are part of a planting plan. In this case, most of these are native to the area. So the birds and the wildlife that are in the area should sort of, these should be common plants to them, or these plants that they are probably able to eat the berries of or the seeds. Some of them will be able to find habitat within these plants. So we had an eye towards that as well. And then one thing it's kind of hard to see, maybe if I actually take a step back in the slides, there was along the path, and in this view, it's just to the right, we have what we call rain gardens. And these it's a big area. Yeah, here's a good shot of it. Just to the right of that curved path, you sort of see some color along there. Yeah. that is still a garden, but it's also an area where all of the water from the roof of the building, so imagine it rains really hard and you have a bunch of water that hits the roof, and typically it would go into the gutters that come down to the ground and maybe just spill out, or they'd go into a pipe and go all the way down to, in our case, Rock Creek or another waterway. Here, we're actually going to collect all of that water, let it sit within those plants, and hopefully allow that water to infiltrate into the soils so that we're not throwing a bunch of water into our natural waterways when we have big rains. So that's great. So that's great for, that's great for us, for people. It's great for the habitat. It's great for the natural environment of the streams. So it's all a win-win. And that's,
and I was just going to interrupt you and just tell you how blown away I already am. You're already thinking about building the bird exhibits itself, which we haven't even gotten to yet.
We're not even there yet.
You're thinking about the people, right? How the space will be used by our guests, how people will view it as they walk in, but you're also even thinking about the wild birds that could possibly use this space as their wild habitat, their wild ecosystem, stopping over at the zoo as non-exhibit birds. That's great.
And it's a great teaching opportunity as well, because we'll have signs outside that tell you about ways you can make your own garden or yard at home more bird friendly, and how you can help birds survive in our region or wherever you live, really.
I love that.
Yeah. So we can go to the next slide. And again, this next slide will be sort of an image of the building right there. Something interesting about the building. The building is, you see sort of the taller building in the background. That's a brick structure that was built in the 30s. Wow. So it's been here for a long time. And it was not a great experience going through that building. For those of you who have been through it, it was a bunch of really small boxes where birds lived in them. We had about 50 of those. And as I mentioned before, the transformation of this building is that we're getting rid of all of those small habitats and we're creating 3 big ones.
Wow.
Which is really cool. And we actually have some work that we are doing inside the building, which we're going to get to in just a second. But I did want us to share that we're under construction right now. So this is kind of a cool moment where we see the rendering right here. And again, you know where the front doors are, where the tall glass is. And you can kind of see a peak in the roof right there. You can, as you follow that peak back, the roof line almost looks like a wing or the form of a bird. That's intentional, of course.
Wow.
But the next slide will show you where we are right now in its construction.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can definitely see where that's going towards the rendering. That's the roof. Yeah, definitely looks like a bird. That's incredible.
Oh, there we go. And so that is where we are today. So that line right along there is the one you saw in the rendering. You see, it doesn't look like a whole lot right now. The form kind of looks like a spaceship almost, but there's still, a bunch of walls and all of the plumbing and all of the flooring and everything still to come. And from a landscape architecture standpoint, you see everything around it is just kind of dirt right now. So that has a long way to go as well. Let's take a look at the next slide. And here we'll get a scene of, and so just a reminder, this is going back to the rendering of the garden. This is another view. This is imagined as if you just came over from Pandas and you're arriving at the garden, and you can see again the view through the building that draws you through, and all the beautiful planting around you. And then we can take a look at the next slide to give you a sense of where we are today.
Wow. And
it too has a lot of work.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting shot though. You see, we had to clear the property a little bit in order just to do all of the work there. We saved as many trees as we could because they're really important to providing shade to people and also habitat to animals. But on the left-hand side of that photo, you start to see the beginnings of that rain garden that I talked about before. It kind of looks like a pool or a ditch of sorts. And so that will eventually be completely planted. It will look lush and beautiful. But again, it will be an area where we can actually collect the water that comes off of the building.
Wow. It looks like a lot of potential.
That's a good way of thinking about it.
I love that.
Let's go to the next slide.
Oh my goodness.
So I mentioned construction documents, and this is an example of a planting plan. This would just be one page in a document of, it can be hundreds of pages depending on the size of a project. But but this would just be one page in that whole set. And it's color coded here on the left. What you're seeing is in plan, the building is on the bottom. And then you see that C shape, that is that path that was striped we saw in the renderings. And then up at the top is the bridge. You just see the start of that bridge that would take you over to elephants and pandas. So this map is just showing all of the planting in color.
Wow.
And each plant has a different color associated to it. And if you zoom in, I'm not sure if you see it on all of your screens, but the plan has little dots and little circles on that plan that represent an individual plant. So we literally think, okay, we're going to need 5 different trees. We're going to need about 600 different shrubs, and we're going to need 3,000 perennials or flowering plants still in this space. And so that's one type of construction document that we would create as a part of the design process.
I just can't believe that you're planning down to like the number of shrubs.
Yeah.
Well, that covers our M of STEAM, right? That's definitely
the math is there, exactly.
Yeah.
And I can also mention, like, so in order to do that, we have to know the areas that we're working with. So we have to know how big those spaces are. And then also we have to often think about how much soil we want to bring in, because often we have to bring in new soil to help the plants thrive. And sometimes we also do a layer of mulch on top. So we have to know the areas of those planting beds. And then we also have to calculate the volume of soil that we would need to bring in to make this all work.
Wow. That's very impressive.
Let's take a look at the next slide. So this is the birdhouse. And I said landscape architects typically work in the outside realm, right? But there are opportunities, particularly at zoos, where landscape architecture is needed inside the building. So the birdhouse will have 3 aviaries, as I mentioned. This one is the largest of the 3. And in the end, it is going to look and feel like a coffee farm in Central America.
Wow.
So it doesn't look like that now, but this is a rendering of what that space should look like. So to get there, it's all about choosing the right plants that will evoke that sort of tropical feel. And some of the plants you may not actually find in Central America, but they will thrive inside a building in Washington, D.C. And they have, similar leaf types or coloring that again, sort of evoke that character. We also will have, this is cool, so it's supposed to be a coffee farm in Central America, so we will actually be growing coffee shrubs here as well.
Wow.
Let's see how that goes.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And so this is a good example, again, of designing for the birds, because we're trying to create a habitat that they will feel comfortable in and will thrive in. And we're also creating an environment that will take our guests, to another part of the world, essentially, and try to give them that experience of bird watching in a coffee farm in Central America. So it's really cool. And the way we do this, I mean, this is another planting plan right here, but inside the building. So we actually have to bring in all kinds of dirt and rock and all kinds of great stuff that we will then plant all of these plants in. And I think we have a couple more drawings ahead. We can probably skip to the next one.
Oh my goodness.
So just like an outdoor project, we have to do construction documents for these interiors as well. This is an example of the planting plan in the construction documents just for this room, just for that aviary. And as you can see here, it doesn't have the color of the last one, but it does have all of the little circles that you can see how they're laid out and where they're planted. And these construction documents aren't just for us to be able to look at and understand, but we have to hand these off to the folks who are building it, or in this case, who are installing the plants. So they can look at the plan and actually place things where we want them to be placed.
I'll know exactly where.
Yeah. And when this happens, I will, as a landscape architect, and probably folks from our horticulture team, we will probably be on site as well to help either direct or review the layout as well to make sure that it meets the drawing.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then let's take a look at the next one. There's a few different ways that we communicate in these construction documents. The planting plan is one way. Here's another way of being able to present that same space. So this is still that aviary, but we're showing it in what's called a section view. So you're kind of seeing it straight on and not from above. And so here you kind of see some of the characteristics of that space. It's obviously a very tall space. On the left-hand side, you can see some of the rock work that's going to happen. In the center, there's sort of a darker area. The hatched areas shows where the soil will be added to the floor of that building. So essentially, we're just going to bring a bunch of dirt into the building and dump it right onto the ground,
Wow.
build it up to enough depth that we can support trees and shrubs. And then on the right-hand side, you kind of see looks like maybe some stairs or a ramp up. Those are stairs that will take you up to a mezzanine or a little overlook area. So you'll be able to get up high and look out over the planted areas. And then you'll just sort of exit to the right and move on to an outdoor aviary.
I love this view because you can really see all of the aspects of it, right? You can see the visitor walkway. So where the visitors will be standing, you'll see some of those habitat elements like those trees and those shrubs that will provide great hiding places for those birds, and the dirt and all the substrate. And that's great. So we are getting a lot of questions about when the birdhouse will open and be done and ready to visit. And while you're mentioning that, if you want to talk about almost maybe the timeline, right? When did you start planning this project and when are we expecting it to be done?
Holy cow. Well, I will tell you right now, the plan is, if everything goes smoothly, and it's been a tough year on a lot of ways, but right now we're scheduled to open the building in January of 22. So next January,
Great.
About a year, maybe a little less than a year from now. And what's really interesting, and I've been a part of this for maybe 2 or 3 years now. It started a long time ago. So that design process really started, I'm not even gonna put a number at it, but it started 10 years ago when we started talking about this and planning for it, and then going through the design phase and now into the construction phase. But what is interesting about the process of opening a building like this is the building itself may be done in August or September.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, we can start moving our staff in and we can start moving our birds in. But there is a period of time, about 4 months or so, that we're trying to protect, where we can essentially, well, there's one more thing. The plants that go in there, we want to quarantine them inside the building for about 30 days. So we want to make sure that any toxins or any chemicals that might be on those plants that came from other nurseries, that they have an opportunity to kind of expel and get out of the environment, at least to a level. And then we'll bring the birds in, and we're going to give them about 4 months of time to acclimate to the space before we bring all the guests and all of the public in. So it's going to be a process. The building will be done a bit earlier, but we won't be opening probably for another 11 months or so.
Well, Elizabeth said that she cannot wait to visit the zoo, that her aunt loves coffee and wants to come to. And I also love coffee, and I'm very excited for some bird-friendly coffee cafes to open.
Fantastic.
We also have a lot of questions about where the birds that lived at the birdhouse currently are.
Great question. We spent a lot of time planning for where they would live while we were building the building, because obviously they cannot be in there right now.
Right.
So there are some of them we actually found other homes for, so they moved on to other zoos. But many of them we have built what we call swing spaces. These are temporary habitats where they can live while we're working on the buildings. And so we ended up building some new habitats behind the scenes, but on our site. We also took over one of the buildings that we use for different things as needed, and we put a bunch of habitats within that space as well. So many of them are on site. We're also propagating, or we're birthing new birds as we go through in preparation for the opening, so that we are sure that we don't think we'll have like all of the birds we want at the end when we open, but we're going to be really close to that, and it should be a really good experience.
That's awesome. Yeah. I have a few more questions, but if you have anything else you wanted to share about the birdhouse before we move on.
I think that's enough. Feel free to ask any questions though. It's a really great project, and just to get a little more excited, hopefully, is like the focus of this is a little unique of the birdhouse, because we are focusing on migratory species of the Western Hemisphere. So we're telling the stories of birds that fly north and south and back and forth over the year and talking about their amazing journeys. These are birds like songbirds that go from South America in our winter, and they come up to perhaps DC at part-time, and maybe they go even further north to breed. And the three aviaries I mentioned are going to be focused on shorebirds.
Okay.
And so it is going to look and feel like the Delaware Bay.
Wow.
Second one is waterfowl, so ducks that land in the prairie pothole region of Canada and the north of America. And this is one of the biggest breeding areas for ducks in the world. And then that last one, the third one we were looking at, is the coffee farm in South America, and there'll be songbirds in there. So it's going to be amazing.
And for those of you who are unaware, we do have the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center as well, who has done tons of work monitoring the migration of all these birds and really trying to study and learn their migration patterns and what we can do to help them. So I'm super excited for this finished birdhouse to really bring that all together. So we talked a little bit about math, right? How much math you use. Can you touch on how you're utilizing those other aspects of STEAM in your career: science, technology, engineering, art, and math?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like landscape architecture and architecture, like it's like we use all of it, you know. It's a great profession in the sense that we have, you know, we are very, we rely on engineering and technology just for building and construction and all of that. But we're really also focused on sort of that intangible sort of, you know, the experience that we're creating as well, and the impacts that we have on people, on animals, and so forth. And we also are very focused on conservation and the environment. So we work with engineers all the time, all kinds of civil engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical, structural, all of them. We also work with artists, like literally artists. So, well, this morning I mentioned I was up at the Birdhouse, and I was working with the artists who are creating these faux rock forms in our aviaries at the Birdhouse. And you know, that might sound like, oh, fake rocks, big deal. But these folks are artists. They are sculpting these stones out of concrete and painting them and making them look like, you know, a muddy bank in Canada and like a sandy shore in Delaware and a volcanic rock in Nicaragua. So it's amazing. It really is amazing. But yeah, everything kind of comes together, and like we work on both fronts, and it's pretty great.
That's awesome. So we do have a question from I hope I'm pronouncing this right, the Demar family. So after you work on a big project, you know, like the Birdhouse, is your job done and you move on to another zoo, or are you staying and providing maintenance?
So my position in particular is that I work for the zoo. So I'm here as long as they'll have me. And then, so when a project ends, you know, I'll be working on another project. In fact, even with the Birdhouse, which is a big project, there are other projects right now that are going on that I'm working on as well. So I work on multiple planes, and you know, the way that it works here is, you know, there's so many projects and there's just one me. So we hire a lot of landscape architects and a lot of architects through the Smithsonian, and they help us then create those documents and help us create the designs that then we implement. So it's a lot of help, but they're contracted in. And so those folks, the way that you know, if a typical landscape architect, let's say, who works for a firm, if you work for a landscape architecture firm, you will work from project to project. So the ones we hire, when they're done, they may go back and work at another zoo. They may go create a playground somewhere else. They may be working on a waterfront somewhere. So that person in that level of profession is doing all kinds of stuff as well.
That's great. I mean, and this has seemed to be a theme throughout this entire series, is collaboration across the park and the different units here, across other zoos, across outside. That's wonderful. We are getting a ton of questions about how you got into this career. Kaylee wanted to know, how long have you known you wanted to work in zoo design? Kennedy, how long have you worked at the zoo? And someone asked, what did you study to get into this job?
Sure. So I have been at the zoo for 5 years. Let's see here. So I got into landscape architecture. I'll start there. When I was younger, I enjoyed drawing. I enjoyed Tinker Toys and Erector sets and Legos. I probably played with Legos way too late into my life. But I always kind of had that sort of creative side that I enjoyed, and I didn't really think professionally or like a job or any of that until later on, probably junior high, high school. And at that point, I really didn't honestly know all of the options. I just knew I wanted to be creative. I knew design was kind of my focus. And it wasn't until I was almost halfway through my first degree, which was in urban design and urban planning, that I was exposed to, things like architecture, landscape architecture, some of the other design fields. And, some landscape architects get into it because they love plants. Some get into it because they love designing for people. Some get into landscape architecture because of the environmental impact that you can have as a professional, where you're improving the environment through your designs. And all of those kind of hit it for me. So like I loved all of those things. And so it wasn't until college really, like I said, through my first degree, where I kind of made the switch and knew that I needed to go to grad school and to become a landscape architect. I will say though that landscape architecture is a profession. It is a degree that you can get. So not most, but many colleges have that degree. Typically it's a 4-year or so, a pretty standard 4-year degree. Within those classes, you take classes about plants. You learn all about plants. You learn about designing to deal with hydrology. So that's how water kind of comes onto the site and how it leaves the site. You talk about grading, how landforms and how you design all of that. But it's also there's typically opportunities to also take creative classes in like sculpture or photography or any of those other creative forms that might help drive some of your inspirations. So I found it to be a really creative, a really fun degree to kind of go through, and you spend a lot of your time kind of drawing and designing. I mean, how bad is that?
I mean, it sounds like a great job. It sounds like you have a lot to worry about when designing, but it sounds like super interesting.
Well, that's the best part about school is you don't have to worry about so much.
Yes. So we are getting a ton more questions. Javon wants to know, what are the good and the challenging parts of your job? And Ava similarly asked, what's the hardest part of your job?
Oh boy. Part of it is, design teams, I mentioned, they're big and there are a lot of folks and there's a lot of experts, people who are passionate and people who are advocating for certain aspects of the design. And so part of, what I think others here do really well is that we kind of, work within the team dynamic and come to a solution that is something that we can all get behind and support. And that can be really tough sometimes. Like there is a lot of effort that goes into that. But there's also sort of one of the most rewarding as well. You have to enjoy working with people and enjoy kind of having and developing that vision that we can all work towards. I think that's really rewarding. I think some of the best parts about the job though are just, meeting the animals and getting out behind the scenes and I was in the beaver habitat the other day and it was just awesome watching those two go around swimming. It was just a lot of fun. So that's one of the biggest rewards, to be honest.
Great. Well, folks, we only have a couple minutes left in our program. So if you do need to leave, please feel free. I am going to pop up this final poll. But we will stick on for a couple more minutes to answer these lingering questions. So if you have the time to stay on, feel free. But if you do need to go, you can take this quick poll. Did you learn something new about zoo careers? And I'll leave that poll up. Additionally, if you close out of this program, you will see a survey pop up in your browser. We would love to hear your feedback so we can continue to learn and grow. We had another great safety question in here from Kennedy, asked if regarding animal safety and animals getting hurt, how do you consider safety so that we ensure animals stay safe and humans stay safe?
Right. I like the way that's stated because we have to think about both, honestly. Yeah. So on the animal front, we do rely on AZA and our animal experts quite a bit on the safety of those animals. I mean, there's, what might be a safe habitat for a lion obviously might not be a safe habitat for a beaver or vice versa. So they will understand kind of the safety limitations or at least considerations maybe that we should be keeping in mind for each animal, and that will drive the design decisions. For people, there are sort of standards like building standards and ADA accessibility standards that we design towards and that we use so that we make sure that what is designed in those areas where we have people, people aren't going to trip, or they're not going to have an opportunity too easily to climb something and fall off. We get a lot of that anyway, but yeah. So and also the types of barriers. We do deal with barriers quite a bit to help separate animals and people, and so we really need to we think a lot about how that interaction works for both the animal and people.
Right, because we want someone who's tall like me to also be able to see an exhibit or an animal, just like my 3-year-old niece who's quite petite, right? Right. So we need to think about those.
We do our best.
So we do have a question about what is that bird behind you?
Oh man, I wish I knew.
Oh.
I don't know the species, to be honest. However, I'll share that is a test print of an exhibit that we hope to open in the Birdhouse, where we're going to have big, beautiful, larger than life, obviously, birds that you'll be able to walk through and see them on the wall, and you'll get really up close. You'll get to see the detail of their feathering, the colors. You can look them right in the eye. I think it's going to be a really cool exhibit. So that was just one of our test prints, and that it landed somehow in my window.
All right. So one of our final questions that I have to ask all of our guests: what is your favorite animal and why?
It's an easy one for me, to be honest. We don't have giraffes here at the National Zoo, and it breaks my heart. But every time I'm at another zoo, I could just stand and watch giraffes all day long, just kind of, lumber around and walk in. It's somewhat, so I don't know, it's just soothing. And, they look kind of weird, and I love it. It's just great.
After spending so much time on the Birdhouse, do you now have a favorite bird species?
Ooh, boy, oh boy. I'm gonna hold my judgment until we open,
okay.
Because it seems like most of my experience has been the Birdhouse with no birds in it.
Yeah.
But some of the shorebirds that we have right now are just like the really long legs and little bodies, and they're kind of like running around a lot. They're fun. They're
just
great.
Sandpipers, and they're so cute. Now, the last question I do want to ask you: we all work in a zoo. We all work at the National Zoo. Our mission is to save species, and we work with, as I mentioned, 370 different species here at the zoo. But what is your biggest conservation passion? What are you most passionate about as far as conservation and the planet?
Well, I will credit my wife with influencing me on this front. But she is also a landscape architect, and she's worked for a couple of different groups, but right now she's working for the District of Columbia. So she works for our city, and her focus has been on green infrastructure. So that is, how do we build things for the city that's like roadways and parks and things like that, and build them in such a way that we're dealing with how water goes into our waterways, and that's controlling how quickly it goes in during a storm, but it's also about how do we clean it and treat it prior to going into our natural waterways. Yeah. And it's a big issue. Here in DC, we have 2 rivers, and I don't think you'd want to swim or fish in either one of them, but there are goals to get them healthy again. And so that's been a big passion of ours. Oh, I even have a hat right now, Anacostia Watershed Society.
Here we go.
But there's ways that you can help with that is, it's simple, like don't litter. That's a big one right there. Throw away your trash, properly, and recycle when you can. If you see trash on the ground, pick it up. Play your role there. So there's a lot of ways we can do it. There's also cleanups that you can participate in, and different ways you can volunteer. There's plantings. They're planting the shoreline of the Anacostia to make it more naturalized rather than a hard edge as it's been over the years. There's a lot of opportunities there, and I think it's a is, aside from just trying to do my best on all fronts every day, that's probably the one that we focus on the most.
I love that, cleaning our waterways for all of our the
It's good for
animals that are
everyone.
living in, and
Yeah.
for ourselves too. I love that. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us for the Wild Side of STEAM. I have
It's been
learned so
great.
much about landscape architecture and exhibit design, and I know that our viewers did as well. Our poll, they all said that they learned something new.
Success.
So before we say goodbye, any last words of advice for our viewers?
Hey, if anybody is interested in landscape architecture or even the design and construction side of things here at the zoo, reach out. Like, people are really nice around here. And I will say, in general, landscape architects are very open to talking to young folks who are trying to, find out what the options are out there. I kind of mentioned that I felt I didn't really know my options until about halfway through college. And so if now at your age is the time to really start to explore. And I think that, that will go a long way. So good luck, everybody.
Well, if you are interested in learning more about exhibit design and landscape architecture as a zoo career, we encourage you to try your hand at our Wildside wrap-up activity. You will actually get the chance to pick an animal, do a little bit of research, and actually help plan and design an exhibit. And that activity will be found on the zoo's website, the webinar page, so check back. And before, we have the poll, wonderful. So once again, once you close out of this webinar, you will see a survey, and that link will also be in the chat. Thank you, Erica, for putting that in. Once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to Matt for a wonderful insight into his career. And we hope you will join us next month for the next installment of The Wild Side of STEAM on Friday, March 5th, where we will get to hear all about zoo pathology. So on behalf of the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute, we hope you have a wild day.